Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode for my YouTube channel. I'm Gabrielle Celeste. I am the owner of AGUA Astrology and I am your favorite spiritual bestie, if you will. I am an intuitive astrologist, tarot reader, numerologist, all the things, and I also co-host the Spiritual Sisters podcast with my siblings, so be sure to check it out. And as you know by now, this channel is basically a place in which I discuss topics that I can't really make a full episode or talk about for an entire episode on for the podcast. And so it's kind of like my ongoing diary, if you will. And what we're going to talk about today is something that has come up as kind of like a thought that lives in the back of my mind, almost rent free, if you will, as I've navigated this most recent transition. And it is what I wish I knew before I became spiritual. Which for me, spiritual, I think really just means is like diving in and doing the inner work, the shadow work, really unpacking my psyche, becoming more conscious, consciously aware, and kind of just getting in touch with the divine, if you will. And then also like honoring and finding that divine within myself. So, all this to say, I think this thought has come up a little bit more frequently in this past week because one question that came up when I was on a podcast and I was on as a guest, and I had mentioned something to the effect of like, I don't know if I would have done the healing had I known exactly what it was and what the work was on an internal level and like what has been required in order for me to look at in order to just kind of like become self-aware and for self-improvement. And I want to preface this and say that this is all really based on how deep down the rabbit hole you choose to go, which in a more formal way of saying that means is like, how conscious do you choose to become once you kind of get an idea of what this work or doing the work actually is? And I think I would be remiss to say and to not say if like I guess this is a key part of like what is often referred to as a spiritual awakening. So it's almost kind of like, you know what's there, but do you choose to step and continuously step into the unknown? Because that's kind of what you're doing as you do the healing work. And oftentimes this is associated with an existential crisis of sorts, because you can also start to, like, one of the most common questions that comes up is starting to question your purpose and what is the purpose of life on earth? What is earth? Like, why are we here? And for me, that time was really my Saturn return. And I think it was always something that was like in the back of my mind, always percolating, something that I was curious about. But because I came from a religious background, I never really, like, it was taboo to really dive deep. But when my Saturn return hit, it became unavoidable. And I've told that story many times on the podcast. But because I was coming back to the whole thought, like, if I would have done this as, like, would I have gone down this road had I known exactly what was going to be asked of me and what it would entail and what type of sacrifice it would be and would have to be made. And I do think that for some people, you're going to feel the calling. I do think it is a calling a little bit more heavily than maybe others. And I think that goes to if your soul actually signed up to do it. And if it's something that you were kind of called and meant to do in this lifetime, in this reincarnation, which we're all about that over here in all of the different platforms. We do believe in our reincarnation, whether, we're talking about that in the podcast. We're very open to those types of topics, is I guess what I'm trying to say. But what I think happened for me in this last week, I actually was reflecting on when I realized everything was spiritual. Like the work that you do, the relationships that you have, literally your purpose on earth, like it is all spiritual. Also, like even down to the foods that you eat, who has touched the food that you've eaten prior to consuming it, how many hands have, and how many people's energies or energies in general have had contact with like what you're putting in your body, and just kind of like seeing like things from like a certain perspective of more like open with spiritual eyes, just a more open perspective. I think there's this misunderstanding that like once you get into the work, it's like, tarot cards and like we don't play with Ouija boards, but like Ouija boards and crystals and candles and all of that. Like it's fun and it definitely is. But I think really once you like open the doors, which are sometimes like that's kind of I guess an illusion, if you will, but it's kind of like the mask that's drawing you in to do said work and to kind of lure you into going deeper and getting more personal with your psyche. Once you really start to realize like, oh, like this is actually what spirituality is all about, sometimes what you'll see is people almost kind of like question if it's worth their time to like if it's worth it to them in general, not just their time, their energy, all the things, to sacrifice and to pay a cost for like the trade-off for almost like a more fulfilling, better, peaceful life. That oftentimes is the result for the pay of doing said work. So I really feel like getting in touch with your intuition is one of the ways in which the work is also done. But I don't think people realize, and this is certainly something that I didn't realize and wish I would have known prior to becoming more conscious, is that the work is never done. So alongside realizing like everything is spiritual, truly like working on yourself is never going to be something that is fully complete. And for one to feel like they're fully, I don't know, healed with their inner child or their lack mindset, because lack is embedded into our society today. Um, I don't know that that's ever fully done because life is a journey and you're constantly being asked to up level and continuing to do the inner work to expand your consciousness to become more aware and one with your psyche is part of it. And I don't and I think that's actually something I would have wished I would have known, kind of just to get an idea of like what I was getting myself into, but I also don't think I would have done this had I not or had I known. So, there you go. I also think another takeaway too is just how much like your body actually starts to reflect back to you um, what is and is not for you, whether it's a certain type of food, most often like decisions, like aligned decisions. Depends. And I do think like noticing and acknowledging those feelings within yourself, even how you feel about other people, really speaks to how awake you are or are not. And can possibly become throughout the process. And that's actually one of the takeaways is like your body's going to tell you. And the more like you build that trust muscle that is your intuition and become more conscious and get one to one with your psyche, your body will become even more and come more online with those messages. And so that's something that I kind of just wish would have been presented to me as fact instead of me having to figure it out as I went along, which is also the purpose of this YouTube channel. So I guess it benefits everyone, right? In some way. But that's definitely one of the things that I wish I would have known as well. And also another thing too is how easy it was to manifest more from an unconscious level than conscious, because you don't really kind of have an idea of like what you're doing. Like, yes, you're attracting it and it really does come off as like magic. Like, oh, like I was thinking about Tim and then 5 minutes later, Tim texts me, right? And I think what the more conscious I have become, the more challenging it has been to manifest, because you're aware of your blocks, you're aware of your limiting beliefs, you're aware of what's holding you back. Whereas like before I was familiar with the terms and the definitions, I think it was a little bit more easy to manifest. So what I can say is that the rabbit hole is never ending, the work is never done. There are gifts and surprises along the ways, and this like learning what is a part of the spiritual world is part of that. And that was just something I've really felt called to speak to today. So I hope that was helpful. But yeah, and you all know where to find me. I will be sure to link the links below, and I'll see you in the next one.